Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Creatures Podcast. Today, Chris and I are beyond excited to have a true conservation hero with us today. Bill Wallauer is joining us on the podcast to talk all about his work documenting chimpanzee behavior. Bill has served as the official videographer, filmmaker, as well as a scientific advisor for the Jane Goodall Institute. And with decades at the Jane Goodall Institute, Bill has documented thousands of hours of chimpanzee life, and which have appeared in dozens of television programs and documentaries. He uses his filmmaking to reveal remarkable capacities of our closest relatives. Bill has served as the camera operator and scientific advisor for over 30 major productions, including the BBC's Planet Earth and Disney's Jane Goodall, The Hope, and also Disney's Chimpanzee. And honestly, that's just scratching the surface of Bill's incredible conservation accomplishments. I am just so excited to be here with Bill in this room or online, and I welcome you to our podcast. Hello, Bill.
Hi, it's great to be here. Hello, everyone. Yeah, Chris, Angie, it's a real pleasure. I love what you do. Keep it up.
Thank
Really
you.
an
Thank
honor
you.
to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're
Well,
really excited to have you.
we love what you do, and I must say I've seen several of your films, but looking through the list, there's a lot more that I'll put on the bucket list. But before we dive into your work, I was hoping you could just give our listeners a little bit of a background. Were you always a nature kid or an animal nerd? We were joking before we hit record that we're all animal nerds here. So was there an aha moment that sort of solidified your career path?
I, so many. I think I was just really fortunate in that I had parents who were curious with the world. They were polar opposites. Dad was a rodeo cowboy for many, many years and grew up,
Fun.
raised in Leadville, Colorado. So I spent time in Colorado. Mom was an English teacher, and so we'd be in. I grew up in rural Oregon, Joseph area, Northeast, and then Southern Oregon, down in Josephine County. So
Beautiful,
beautiful
yeah.
parts of the world. And we'd be in the Kalmiopsis wilderness one weekend, at the Shakespearean festival the next. And so I just have this endless curiosity for the wild, for people, for culture. And so traveling became a big part of our lives growing up. And so I was just really, really fortunate to have incredible mentors as parents. But, if you didn't have mentors as parents, I mean, not everyone does. Not everybody is lucky like that. There are people around you, other people who I've found that I've latched onto and said, "Will you take me someplace?" Or, "What do you know about this?" I was fortunate in my situation, but I do encourage people, young people to, find somebody who has similar interests, curiosities, and there's all kinds of things in your area that you can do to get, more involved in the natural world around you and conservation and all these things that um, make our lives richer, but make our lives survivable. I mean, we can't live without a healthy environment. And so, we are just part of this huge network and circle of life. And the more we can be involved in it, the more we understand about it, the more we can, nurture and help survive on this wonderful planet. So, yeah, growing up in rural Oregon, we would be out camping or fishing or, just trying to find elk, to see elk. And every one of these things that you see life is so magnificent, just in your own backyard. And we always had bird books and binoculars. We weren't hardcore birders. I'm that now, but not growing up.
So is Chris.
Yeah, we were always just so curious about, what was going on around us. And I was very lucky that they supported me through university as well. I went to Oregon State and have a degree in ecology, especially riparian ecology, which are the green areas around water. And I mean, when you think about the energy of an ecosystem, all of that is draining downhill towards streams and creeks and ponds and wetlands and things. And it's where so much life occurs. And so I just kind of dove into that major, and I loved every bit of it. And from there, I joined the Peace Corps, and I was pretty done with American politics and by the late '80s, and I just wanted to get out and do something different. And volunteering had always helped me in my life. Like if I wanted to know about something, you volunteer with a group that does it, and you get firsthand knowledge and experience. And so I joined the Peace Corps and went to Tanzania and met Jane Goodall, and the rest is history. I had no idea. I didn't know much about chimps at the time either, and not anything about filmmaking. And so, despite the fact I was highly underqualified for the position I finally got, fake it till you make it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, first of all, there's a big lesson there for listeners, especially ones that are looking to get involved in conservation, that you don't need all the letters behind your name. You don't need to go and study XYZ or XYZ, and you just volunteer. You look for those opportunities, and life is a journey. It's not a race. It's not a sprint. I love that you grew up in Southern Oregon, something we didn't talk about before we hit record, because I grew up in California, but my dad was in Southern Oregon, Medford area, Central Point. And I grew up in the mountains of Oregon in the summer. Like, I would spend all summers with him. And I almost went to OSU for my PhD, but I went off to Texas instead. Beautiful part of the country. So your Pacific Northwest is so different than Tanzania and Uganda, and
Yeah.
so what was it like when you met, Jane? And Angie and I have talked about Jane Goodall, I think, from like episode 1.
Wow.
Angie coined
Yeah.
this. Angie's
Yeah.
had said, "You never know who's going to be the next Jane Goodall." And I think she said that in episode 1 or 2, 7, 8 years ago when we started the podcast.
Wow.
Well,
She's a big
from
hero
an
of mine.
education point of view, like every informal lecture I gave when I was a zookeeper at the farm in the zoo milking cows, probably
Yeah.
some people or milking goats, some people would think, "Oh, that's not, I mean, you're just talking to first and second graders. They
Sure.
don't even have any
Yeah.
interests. They're not paying attention." I'm like, "Oh, no, no. You never know. You never know who's going to be the next Jane Goodall, and I could help inspire them to keep going."
Absolutely. I mean, in any classroom that you speak to, there might be someone who had never wasn't even aware of Jane and her mission and her
Mhm.
life story, and just hearing that alone tells, thousands of little girls around the world, if she could do that, I could do that. And you just
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to the little boys as well, but especially, Jane being who she is, and a woman in 1960 going off to Africa, not knowing what she was going to find, just knowing that she wanted to be involved in animals somehow and spend time in the field observing them. Um, Follow your dream is what she says over and over. And there will never be another Jane Goodall. I mean, I'm convinced of that. But what if we inspire, you know, thousands of almost Jane Goodalls?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
Jane's dream. Jane knows that there won't be another Jane Goodall, and she doesn't even like that question. Who's going to follow in your footsteps? Well, I've got this Roots and Shoots program that's inspiring young students all over the world to get involved in their community and make a difference for people, animals, and the environment. And that's what they're doing. And this organization's been around since the early '90s, and now I meet adults who are leaders in their communities, making decisions what's best for all of us. This idea of One Health, that my if my neighbor's sick, or if my stream is sick, I'm sick. You can't be healthy without healthy people around you, and we're all working together to achieve that. And so, if nature isn't healthy, we have some work to do, and that's what those kids are doing. And that's going to be the next generation of Jane Goodalls.
Well, and Bill, you actually lead into my next question really well. As far as the Jane Goodall Institute and Roots and Shoots, you've been with them for over 30 years. Can you just touch briefly on the mission of the Jane Goodall Institute and Roots and Shoots for our listeners?
Sure, and I think even going back farther, like, not everyone will know who Jane Goodall is. You know, there's some could be some people in your audience who are familiar with her and her work, but not not so much the details. So, again, um, she's from Bournemouth, England. She always had a fascination, like I did, for animals. She had animals in her life who had major influences on her life, who taught her that animals had emotion and this idea that they should be numbered and, categorized and you can put them in a box. No, they're all individuals just like you and me, right through the animal kingdom. And she came with that kind of energy. Met Dr. Louis Leakey, who it was a scientist in East Africa at the time, involved in anthropology, and Jane got to go the opportunity to go to Gombe National Park in 1960 and study wild chimpanzees. And in a way, that changed the world because her discoveries while she was there, there used to be a saying, "Man the tool user." One, that's very sexist, but two, it's far from accurate. It's just we weren't willing as a culture and society to invite non-human animals into our realm. It's like we're better than them. We can do all these things, and what we really know now is that they do a hell of a lot better of things better than we do.
Hmm.
And that their tool use, their emotional capacity, all of these things are much more sophisticated than we ever imagined. And Jane opened those doors. And so, some of the big discoveries were like the tightness of the mother-infant bond that lasts a lifetime, the tightness of communities that very much like humans that touch and reconciliation. How do you problem solve? All of these things are going on in front of her, and she brought that to the world. So it wasn't just the tool use; it was a lot of different other things, even hunting and meat eating, warfare. Some of the less pleasant things about them that we can reflect in ourselves. She brought to the world, but that's not all she brought. Beyond the science, it was about the time I was arriving in Africa in 1989 that Jane flew over Gombe National Park in small plane and was horrified by what she saw. Gombe was becoming an island. Um, the population growth, and just the poverty, the need to keep moving your crops and growing more food, was creating an island out of Gombe. So it's very few chimps coming in, very few chimps going out. And just that determination that she had to bring the chimps to the world, she, to me, brought a new form of conservation to the world that is, you know, locally based, community based conservation that didn't just look at this is a natural resource. First, you don't want to commoditize the land around you. Trees aren't a commodity to most indigenous people living around the world. They're brothers and sisters, wildlife as well. And so, with that in mind, she hired a team of Tanzanians, um, professionals, to work with 17 villages around Gombe National Park and just sit with them and say, your lives are really in jeopardy. Your children's lives are in jeopardy. It can't keep going the way it does. Um, you have, wildlife conflict with animals inside the national park. You've seen people actually almost favoring the national park over your existence. And she turned all of that on its head with her Takari program. And what I think one of the biggest things that she's done is brought to us an idea that you can't have conservation without the support of local people. They have to benefit. They have to be involved. They have to be involved in the decision making around their villages. And so we have a very so we've gone from that in the early 90s with the Tanzanian team to spreading that from 17 villages to Western Tanzania. And then this model that looks at health, water, fuel wood. Where are we getting our fuel wood? Is that responsible? Is that sustainable? Community forests. People used to go and collect mushrooms. People used to go and have collect honey and collect other things that was very sustainable. But eventually those forests all got mowed down simply because of the population. They didn't have the tools to bring those forests back. And so that's what Jane has done in these villages. And it's a really neat process. I've gotten to film this process, and now we're bringing cutting edge science and AI into this formula. And so we have volunteers in the villages who take a tablet out and, in real time will upload, somebody's come in and cut down a couple trees right here. We can call the authorities. It's just this incredible GIS and
Mm.
ground truthing and incredible teams of volunteers, and Roots and Shoots to support, and now Roots and Shoots kids who are in those areas who are now adults.
Mhm.
Family planning as well, health and family planning. What do we do, for the next generation and 7 generations ahead, when we're using all our resources up now, and how can we change those things? So education, all of these things are tied together, and not every village is the same. Each community across the US could do the same thing, get together. What do the elders say? Especially I live in upstate New York where the Haudenosaunee are so influential. And it's, the women's movement, a lot of the women's movement was based on the matriarchal society of the Haudenosaunee. And, we don't write that in our history books, do we? But that had been the case, across the world, that the elders, especially the women who are supporting and tying the communities together, are very much involved now in land use planning. And so it's a model that we could duplicate worldwide. And it's, I'm just so thankful to be part of an organization and working for Jane and for the amazing family. I don't even call it, like employees, the family that she has built around her that are thousands strong now around the world. So sorry,
It's
sorry to kind of carry on there.
no, no, no.
I'm
No.
just like,
Yeah.
sometimes I tear
I'm ready to
up,
pack my bags and be
you
part of the
know,
family. Before we hit
right?
record, I was like, "Can I come? Can I come help? What can
Yeah.
I do?" So
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Well, that's the
it's
right attitude. That's for sure.
Yeah.
no. There's a lot of really really good things going on. That the Jane Goodall Institute has not only created but has sustained and is a model for moving forward in conservation. So we definitely appreciate all you and your family do, not only for the chimpanzees, but for the local people in the area and for the whole community
Yeah, and
as
we're
well.
not just talking about chimpanzees, we're talking about the habitat in which they live
Exactly.
and the
Hmm.
fact that they're supported by, all the other species around them.
Yeah.
And we don't, you know, w- we're a science-based and conservation-based organization, but, a lot of us are naturalists. And I think it's almost more clear to people like me who are kind of naturalist conservationists how little we know. These hidden partnerships and symbiotic relationship, meaning, you know, two species, maybe not even of the same, genus, family, or kingdom, helping one another to survive. Fungus and trees, amazing
Yeah.
relationships and partnerships. But when you lose one bird species, what does that mean? Maybe they're the key species who carry the seed to the climax tree species of the forest. Every individual matters is what Jane talks about, and every individual species is critical, the native species in your area. And that's not just true for Gombe, it's true everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's all under threat.
Yeah, it starts in your backyard. I mean, it definitely does. God, there's a lot to unpack there. It was fascinating to listen to you talk, but it's so true. I mean, Jane Goodall was one of my heroes growing up as a young boy, and watching her. And I'm long in the tooth in the '70s and '80s, and she came to Florida. Angie and I got that 1 minute meet and greet. Like that was
Oh,
that was
great.
just when you're meeting your hero. And I just thanked her for inspiring me to study, become a professor. And that led to this podcast with Angie, inspiring me too. And, so her ripple effects across the planet are huge. And it's so like just one of the best humans on the planet. She is doing so much for the world, and she's not, promoting. It's not ego. It's, hey, I'm using what I've done in my platform to make the world a better place. And it's incredible. And you've been part of that journey for a long time. I want to ask you, specifically, because you're on the ground doing this community-based conservation, what's the role ecotourism plays in that? And Angie and I doing this for now 8 years, we see that it's just so
Yeah.
gray. Conservation's gray. There's not one strategy, but is that playing a role, or is it more so we've got to get in these impoverished areas, empower the people to find alternative revenue and stuff so they can, build up
Sure.
their lives like they want to, so they don't have to go in
Yeah.
the forest and poach and do all these things. So I guess just kind of some insight on the conservation approaches that's going on in that part of Africa.
So we could not survive and do what we do without the support and partnership of Tanzania National Parks. And it, not all, green spaces and protected areas are like that. But in our case, ecotourism is done through the national parks. We support each other as we can, and we bring in revenue through to keep the parks going through the film projects I work on. We bring a lot of our own people there. We have research fees, so a lot is going into the sustainability of Gombe. But another side to that is one of the biggest threats to chimpanzees is disease. So we also have to work very close together, not to. I think it was Aldo Leopold who said the problem with nature lovers is that we love nature to death. And it's very well said, isn't it? That as soon as we find the, the Grand Canyon, we build a national park and create tourism there. As soon as we find old growth trees, we build a road and and cut a hole in the middle of a redwood. So we have this kind of a little bit um, twisted and difficult relationship with nature in that we all need it and love it. We need contact with it for our own mental health. I believe that almost every day we need contact with nature. And yet, how do we fulfill that for people? Sustain, the national parks through tourism, and not overutilize the resource or endanger the chimps. And so those are very, very big concerns of the Institute and the national parks. And so that revenue goes to the national park. That's not something that there is some money that comes into the local communities. We have been exploring that over time, but not all of those models have worked very well. Like bringing ecotourism into an area, it's usually a handful of people rather than the entire community. So we're more of kind of six different types of projects within the communities themselves that we focus on. And I think I hit on almost all of those. Another one is education, and we have a fund called the Wanda Babowski Fund that is scholarships for at-risk young women who would because I mean what you were talking about, who's the next Jane Goodall? Could be somebody who is an orphan who has zero resources and who's just waiting for the right opportunity, has done well in school, and this incredible fund who is managed by a lovely person in California has educated not just tens but dozens and even 180 more, close to 200 young women around the Kigoma region who are now supporting themselves and their community leaders now. And so empowering women in places that they haven't had a voice for a long time is another part of what we do. And so and we also have to be very careful about that too, because you don't want to change culture. Like something like family planning is a difficult topic, and it's a political topic. It's a religious topic, and so we have professionals who are very, very good at this, who can navigate all that political minefield. And we've had first seminars for women in the villages, and then the men come along, and they see the families that just have two or three kids who are getting to all go to secondary school and do well. And then if you have that old system of just reproduce until you can't, that's 10, 11, 12 kids sometimes. in that at that level of income, it's just so difficult to support all of those kids. And one from just a resource base, but two from an educational base and a health base. We're all healthier if we can, you know, make those impacts. And so, yeah, it's a really, really um, inspiring model to follow, and quite complicated. It isn't just easy, and it's not one size fits all.
No, I mean,
It's and some of the villages still quite rightfully are skeptical of help. Here we are to help you.
yeah,
How many times have indigenous people in North America heard that? And we keep breaking treaties and letting
Yep.
people down and doing things that
Yep.
are atrocious. And in Africa, it's the same way. Like how do you get people to trust you? And it's through literally decades of reaching out and working with people, so that they find out there's not anything in it for us. It's only working to make Gombe, the surrounding area, now the village forests, and more corridors connecting species to one another, which is avoiding that island effect that species get isolated.
Mhm.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's
yeah,
it's
a
it's
lot in there, isn't there?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the biggest take home too, I try to remind listeners is at this point, there's not one silver bullet for conservation. It really is complex. There's different approaches. We're still learning it. There's a lot that we're doing right. There's some that we're probably doing wrong and needs to evolve over time. But you mentioned education on the ground locally and how important that is, and I just really want to applaud the Jane Goodall Institute for and Roots and Shoots for what they're doing with that. I mean, it's just incredible, and the data is there to suggest that not only suggests but provides
Yeah,
evidence that getting the locals involved is very key to long-term
yeah,
conservation in the region. And but switching gears a little bit
yeah.
to talk more about your
It's a
expertise that you trained yourself to do with filmmaking and storytelling that way, as far as bringing these chimpanzees, their behaviors to life on film, and then sharing that with millions of people as a way not only to educate the masses, get us excited about chimpanzees, but
yeah.
also turn us all into conservationists and wanting to fight for these chimpanzees. So I was hoping if you could share with us one of your favorite moments that you caught on film, or maybe not even on film, that you've had with the chimpanzees sometime in your decades of research at Gombe.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I
it's
hope you
okay if
have
you
some
have two or
time.
it's okay if you have two or three. I get it.
Yeah.
It's hard to narrow it down to one.
Yeah.
Yeah, those pivotal moments, almost like threshold moments in your life of things that have just changed who you are. And seeing a wild ape in the field for the first time, for me, it was gorillas in Zaire at the time as a Peace Corps volunteer, and then being offered the chance to go to Gombe National Park. And the first time I saw a chimp, to me, it was as powerful, Chris, as your experience meeting Jane Goodall, like just beyond blown away. And I felt the same with Jane. And I'm not somebody who's starstruck, but Jane,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jane got me. There's the lump in your throat, and
Yeah.
am I going to say something stupid? uh, but
That's me right now, Bill.
that,
That's me right now.
um, but yeah, when I saw Prof, he was sitting, it was sunset. He was sitting on the beach eating these golden flowers with a golden red sunset behind. And it was just, I want to be part of this. I want to, how can I make this, couple of months of volunteerism, last a lifetime? And I probably didn't even think of it in those terms. But, it was that first evening. I saw Prof there. He was eating, and I followed him into the forest until he climbed up, into the canopy and built a night nest up there, which is what chimps I later learned do every night of their life. Um, and he looked up at me. I think I was just kind of bringing in my luggage and things, and with the same kind of I wouldn't even say piercing eyes, because that almost sounds a little bit aggressive, but just an intelligence and a curiosity that I'm not sure I'd ever been able to credit a non-human animal for. And, since then I look for that and I see it all over the animal kingdom. But, I was a really rural kid, and to me our animals were great, but they were, to be used. And I had chickens and I had an egg route. We had sheep and pigs and horses and, rabbits, and loved them, but we also, use them as a commodity. And so it's a different relationship. Like when I go back to where I grew up, I don't have as much in common with the kids I grew up with as I used to. Because through the lives of the chimps, they've brought me. Jane couldn't have said it better than her book Through a Window. You're seeing the rest of the animal kingdom through the eyes of the chimps, because we're so physically similar to them. It doesn't take long for a novice to become a bit of a primatologist. You would know immediately, when a chimp is sad because they're whimpering and their lower lip sticking out. You don't have to be. You can any age you can be a primatologist, which is around chimps. And so that moment was one. Another, I found out, Jane was delighted that I brought my video camera, because they tried a video project there that hadn't worked, that the cameras weren't stable enough and sturdy enough, and they kept breaking. I'd studied elephants when I was in the Peace Corps in the Saluda Game Reserve. And one of the things that frustrated me is with stills photography, you can't really tell a whole story. There's a lot of missed stuff that happens in relationships between the species that you're filming, that you can't see with stills. And so I thought, I'm going to save my money up before I go buy my ticket and buy a little camera. And Jane was delighted because she had just lost some footage that was, very, very dear to her. And that was of poor little Faustino being weaned by Fifi, who was the grand matriarch of the community. And so she asked me to go replace that. So I was going to do something else at Gombe, and she immediately kind of gave me a job with my camera to go out and try to get footage of Faustino and Fifi in these horrible weaning conflicts. And I found out, well, Fifi's pregnant and nobody's ever seen a great ape giving birth in the wild. And so I just followed her every day for 46 days, nest to nest, 12, 13-hour days. I think I lost 10, 15 pounds. And I managed to see her giving birth. And watching the reaction of the siblings was just extraordinary. And she herself, immediately looking down and falling in love with her infant. I will never forget those moments. And they just became, so, influential the rest of my life. And, of course, when I saw Jane next, the first thing she said was, did she get it on video? And just the data I was collecting. So I was collecting really interesting pre and post parturition data. Nobody had ever done what I'd tried to do before. And so how far is she traveling? Where is she going? What's she eating? What are each kid's doing every 5 minutes? So I have volume. I have a PhD in, which I've never written up, in all of that pre and post parturition data, because it doesn't, no parallel exists in any species. And so uh, in the end, she was more curious about the birth itself than she was about all the data. As she is. She loves the kind of anecdotal story. And so she said, forget all that detailed data. My favorite chimp in the world, Gremlin, is pregnant as well. Follow her and see if you can get this on video. And so, when Jane Goodall asks you to do something, it's going to take a heck of a lot to make me not want to do that. So I just buckled down and did it again, did one of these long follows, and was able to get a video of Gremlin giving birth to Gaia. Jane and I agreed that Gaia, the Earth Mother, was the great name for this little being. And I'm happy to report both of them are still alive and both of them are still having babies.
Good.
So cool.
52. And I've followed Gaia her whole life. And she's still around. She's obvious. She was born on Valentine's Day, 1993. And so, she is 32 years old and it's still going strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are three moments
Incredible.
that, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
There's lots of them, but yeah.
So, okay, following them for 40 something days, how
Yeah.
difficult is that? Like, I'm sitting there thinking, beautiful storytelling, and I'm like, where are you sleeping? Where are you getting your food and water? And how many tapes do you have? Or because now everything's
Yeah.
digital, but back then
Yeah.
you didn't have it. So, what are some of the challenges? I don't think people can appreciate going into these forests and following these wild animals and capturing moments like that. Like it's fascinating. By the way, if you need help writing that dissertation, me and Angie will volunteer. We will help edit. We will look over the data because that is fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating.
It's really cool data,
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
the changes of behavior over time, and
Sure.
the fact that the females go off by themselves, because there's a reason they go off by themselves, which Jane found out in the '70s through if you know the passion story. So anyway, that's another tale, but yeah, I was kind of inventing the wheel because the batteries didn't last very long. The tapes were kind of 2 hours, so you'd have to bring extra tapes, and you'd get to the end of one, but you have 15 minutes left, but you only took so many to Africa. And so you have to shoot the next 15 minutes and then bring another tape or two out, and the batteries were a constant issue. That I had a little solar panel and would charge the batteries every day, and just managed to keep the whole thing afloat. The other issue is that we're bipeds and chimps are quadrupeds, meaning they evolved beautifully coexist in their habitat. You cannot swim through the vines that they go through. It's just so difficult at first. And this is where Southern Oregon comes in. When you think about the topography of Southern Oregon, how steep is that coast range? How thick? We get 150 inches of rain a year there. I cut my teeth, studying spotted owls and running around those forests in the perfect habitat. And so I was kind of um, built for that. And I'm not very tall, so I could follow the chimps every place they went. Nobody had ever really tried to do media in that way before, especially filmmaking, which is a big 16 millimeter cameras and the big tripods and lenses. Um, just was what I was trying to do was almost impossible, without the small equipment that I had. And it was still, the day Fifi gave birth, she climbed a 180-foot cliff and I lost her. I mean, I had to go slightly around where she went up because she was going up vines and so forth. And I got there, and I, she'd started to go into labor, and she had climbed along a huge tree, and looking up through this multi-layered canopy for any indication about where she was, because if I hadn't found her again, I might not be sitting here right now. That's how influential that moment was. But I saw a little movement. They have a very particular smell that you get used to smelling, and I spotted with my binoculars a hand sticking out of her nest. She'd gone up and built a day nest in the top of the tree, and that must be Fifi. And sure enough, she climbed down and had her baby a couple hours later. So the physical nature of the work that we do as filmmakers in Gombe and the researchers as well. Those guys, the Tanzanians, we have a Tanzanian staff who goes out, and Jane and I will be the first to admit that they know more about chimps than anyone on the planet. The backbone of Gombe is the Tanzanian field staff, and they know how to follow chimps. They are very helpful, to distinguish what kind of trail when you follow them will work, and what's going to turn into a vine tangle that you can't get through. And you learn the forest as well. You learn to be your friend and not fight her, because as soon as you fight her, you're going to be just kind of hanging like a spider, like a victim of a spider in a web.
Uh,
And the less you can fight through it, and the more you can just kind of, I don't know, swim through it, the better off you'll be. And so you learn all of those things as you go.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's very, very demanding.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
and Bill, what's the most surprising or misunderstood behavior about chimpanzees that you've captured on film or once again have in your notes somewhere?
I guess I could give a couple answers to that, but I think people are most blown away in the footage when they clearly see an emotional reaction to a force of nature, something like a waterfall display. Like, Chris, you have waterfalls in New Zealand, which you must go to, and
Hmm.
you are speechless. I
Hmm.
guarantee it. You come around the corner and see that for the first time, and the hair raises up on the back of your neck. You're getting this negative ion charge that kind of rejuvenates your body. It is nature to the max when you're experiencing those things. Angie, I'm sure you as well. You've experienced lightning storms that have just blown your mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Rainstorms that are like virtual whiteouts.
Yes.
So the chimps have similar reactions to these. And, Jane, I think quite rightly, believes these are the foundations of spirituality and religion, that the chimps will stand up and dance for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time, even when they're alone. They're not doing this as a social thing or for a hierarchical thing, or it is their way of expressing their feelings about what they're experiencing. I think that blows people away. Yes, they're complicated, they're complex, and they have emotions, but, I think they didn't really understand until they see the footage of that stuff that, what kind of level, is that depth of emotion. And I'm quite convinced that there isn't an emotion that that the humans can have that chimps don't, and I think my dad said it best was that, it's not them being so like us. Oh, chimps are so much like us. It's not, we're like them.
Yeah.
They've been around longer, and those things that you're feeling inside are started with the non-animal in the non-human animal kingdom. They aren't unique to us at all. And I think that's probably the most surprising thing to people when they talk about these things in other species as well.
I think one of the most fascinating things Angie and I have come across is this idea of culture in
Yeah.
animals. Because it was really when we were doing a deep dive into orcas and we had to divide it over 2 episodes because we were just like, there's so much here with behavior. And I was introduced to this idea of orcas having culture. And I'm like, no, that's a human thing.
Yeah.
But no,
Yes.
if when you define culture
Yeah.
and you actually look at the definition of culture and what that means, and then you start applying it to other species than us, chimpanzees, like you were just talking about dancing. I want to see that. Like, how did I miss
Yeah.
that?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, by
Yeah.
themselves, which is something I mean, I do all the time. I
I
love it.
exactly. I was way up
Yeah.
in Upper Rutanga. I was
Yeah.
shooting a film called Year of the Chimpanzee, and I had a little Bolex camera, which is very lucky that day that I had it because Tubi just showed up out of nowhere, and I was, as I do, sitting underneath a 60-foot falls, just enjoying a moment in the forest, and he came and performed this extraordinary dance, and it's mind blowing when you see it. Um, and then he just went off on his way. The first one I saw, Freud, was the alpha male at the time, and he sat down there. He sat down after the dance, and with his hand, like he was almost like the thinker, gazing at the falls afterwards. He sat there for 5 minutes and then moved away. What was he thinking? What was going on in his mind? And, it's interesting as well, like, aesthetically, are they I mean, I've heard birders talk about, the terns lining up on the East Coast and watching the sunrise, like, what's going on with that? Do chimps, when they're looking at an extraordinary sunset like the ones we get in Tanzania, purples and reds and oranges that are just mind-blowing, um, are they moved by that in ways? I'll never know, and it's a question that I sometimes that I would give body parts to be inside the head of a chimp for just one day, even 10 minutes. Like, what's going on in there? I got a really interesting email. Jane and I were contacted by an astronomer who'd done a lot of work with whales who navigate by the stars, and he was curious what we thought about the chimps lie in their nest looking up at the stars for 10, 12, 13 hours a night. They have a very they're much more practical about sleep than we are.
Mhm.
We tend to stay up late and get up early. They go to bed
Yeah.
early and get up late.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Who's smarter after all?
Mhm, mhm,
But as
Totally.
mhm.
they're lying in there in their nest, and the moon's different every night, they see, something like uh, an asteroid come through the atmosphere, and what are they thinking about? What are they thinking
Mhm.
about on these starry nights that you can, seriously see a billion stars if you could count them? Um, I do wonder. I don't know. I would give anything to know, but I suspect they're as curious as I am about the heavens as well.
Yeah. I mean, is you paint such a beautiful picture, and that's why I love your storytelling through all the documentaries, and of course, being here with us now. But Bill, I was wondering, what role do you think your storytelling with your films plays in driving conservation actions compared to, I don't know, sometimes how I do it in a suit, standing up and giving a 10-minute talk where
Yeah.
half the people fall asleep. I try not to have that happen. But
Yeah.
how does that land? Because I mean, our chimpanzees, and if you could also touch on too where we're at with their conservation.
Sure. But I mean, your role is just as important as mine, just even if it's just community based. Yours is internationally based. But if you're a conservationist who works for a small NGO protecting a green space, the talks that you give at schools, the slideshow that you can give. I'm kind of old school. I guess PowerPoint presentation, whatever it is that you give, is so meaningful. Going back to what we were talking about before, you might inspire somebody who hadn't had any contact with nature, and you show show them a picture of the warblers who migrate through here. Most adults don't know the vision splendor that is available to them in their own backyards. So that is a huge role. And I think my wife and I are very much followed in Jane's footsteps. Now, do we want to come out of the forest? Kristen's a brilliant stills photographer, amazing sound recordist. We've done a lot of films together. Getting to follow chimps together, and getting to see and record these stories, and then share them, with the general public. It is all us giving back, I think, to what we've gotten, from the chimps, from the forest, because we haven't even scratched the surface of what else is in that extraordinary forest where the chimps live. Don't get me started, because it could be birds one day or insects the next, or freshwater forest crabs who run around the forest like things you've never heard of, spiders that can catch sunbirds.
That's
I could just
crazy,
go
yeah.
on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see in my footage, like my archival footage, that I'm often shooting things, and so is Kristen, things that aren't chimp related, that are just forest related, and what else is out there. And sharing the fact that there are parallels, between chimp conservation, the forest they live in, with the very forest in your community and neighborhood. And, how rare is it to find true old growth forest in upstate New York? Pretty darn rare. There's a couple
Yeah.
little pockets of it. What can we do more? How can we talk to the people who are responsible for, nurturing, stewarding those areas, to rather than have, I don't know, is, a natural resource plan the right word? I don't think so. It's more of a 500-year plan to
Yeah.
bring back what was,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
truly recapture what was there. I think that's the way we heal, and that's what gives us hope. That's what, because if you get up and look at the news, you're going to lose all hope in the in the world and humanity. And yet, I meet people like you every day. I meet in upstate New York. We just have so much going on here, in terms of, history, indigenous knowledge, activism. We have the oldest peace council in the U.S. right here in Syracuse, and so the sky's the limit of what we can do and what impact you can have. And and you don't want to burn yourself out. dealing with all the sad stuff. Do a lot of really happy stuff too.
Yeah.
Take time to just immerse yourself. Leave your camera behind. Chris and I do this all the time. Leave your camera behind. Leave your sound recordings behind. Leave your phones behind, and just listen. Close your eyes. Leave with some of your senses behind. Listen to what's going on out there, and then start throwing your ear. I don't know if you've heard this concept, but if you focus on an ant that's crawling around the leaves below you, you can weed out everything else and just hear that ant. And then try something that's 10 meters away, and then 15. And then listen for something that's so far away you have no idea what it is, but you hear that murmur out there. The more you learn about who that might have been or what that might have been, the richer your experience gets. And I'm getting better and better at birding by ear. And that's led me to another path called bioacoustics, that we spread these mics out all over the forest, and non-invasively, we can record who's there, go and collect all of that data, and use artificial intelligence. And this is a JGI project, like cutting edge science stuff, to find out who's there. I found our team and I found in Gombe 6 bird species that weren't on the very extensive list of birds. We've been studying there for 65 years. And believe it or not, I was listening for nightjars and owls in the nocturnal data, and found a galago that we didn't know was there.
So
And
cool.
so there's a 450-mile species extension of this galago, simply because we were looking at the diversity of what's in Gombe National Park. And we can duplicate these models anywhere in the world. I'm working with the Seneca, the Tonawanda Seneca Nation in Western New York, who's trying to stop this horrible industrial park going in next to the Old Wood, which is this extraordinary old growth forest that they've been teaching their children and grandchildren for countless generations, is now under threat by this industrial park that's being put in next door. And so I'm using this bioacoustic work to try to find endangered species. And, we have teams of botanists working with a local university. So this stuff translates, not only from my profession and what I do here is, but, doing what Jane encourages you to do, get involved in your local communities. And, for people, animals, and the environment. And so it's just this endless message of hope that emanates from Jane, through the Institute, through all the Institute, the Jane Goodall
Mm.
chapters around the world. And especially within the roots and shoots, I mean, talk about enthusiastic. Once you turn a kid onto something that they set their mind to, pollinators, bees are under threat. The native bees are under threat. I can change this. I can be like
Yes.
Jade. Let's go
Yep.
for it. Start
Yep.
learning about, go to a botanist and find out what were the original indigenous species around here, but, from a pollinator's point of view. And the next thing you know, there's milkweed, there's purple coneflower popping up in yards. There's, I have a great story. This in Nebraska, the Roots and Shoots chapter in Grand Island has changed the green space within the city. They themselves did all this, and they educated the local people that there's 2,000 to 4,000 species of native bees in North America, and the honeybee isn't one of them. And the honeybee can actually displace native bees at times. And so they are educating the adults about these things. And so to me, that's just heartwarming and so hopeful.
There is a lot of hope. There is a lot of hope. And I know Angie and I, we always got to highlight the bad stuff, because, we got to motivate people to make change. But, you were talking, I interviewed a young man a few weeks back, Loris, in Montana, and he's part of a group that's out there educating people on insecticides. What are you spraying in your gardens that are impacting all your native species? And somebody young like that gives me so much hope for the world.
Right?
So much hope. Yeah, it
Right?
does. When you see it, and then inspiration. So we're running out of
Yeah.
time. I really just overall, because I mean, what you're doing with the Jane Goodall Institute and all your filmmaking, I'm taking notes furiously. I've got a lot of books to read, a lot of films to see. It's just, what's the overall picture looking like there in Africa for chimpanzees?
Um, I mean, sometimes I'm more hopeful and sometimes less hopeful. We have a long way to go. Um, you know, as as a species, when we value personal gain and wealth more than we value our futures, we have a lot of work to do. It's going to take monumental change to actually turn the tide. I think I have hope that we're slowing things down. We're slowing the negative directions down. um, but are we winning? Not yet. We have a lot of work to do. Um, we understand more that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we didn't understand the disease transfer issues as well between humans and apes. We've got that now under much better control. But where humans, local communities and apes overlap, it's much more difficult to control that kind of disease transfer issue. Obviously, deforestation is still a big issue with chimps, as is the commercial bushmeat trade and poaching. So you know, it, it's it's hopeful, but we have a lot of work to do, and we need resources, and some of those have been recently challenged. We had a wonderful team with USAID we worked with for a very, very long time. Those funds are now gone. We have challenges, and the institute sometimes reinvents itself for the better. Will we get to more people by having to change the way we fundraise? Probably. And more people who are more influential, who don't like what's going on right now, may be more willing to support us in ways that they hadn't before. Are
Mhm.
we tapping into something we haven't been able to before? So there's always opportunities where there is darkness, and there's a lot of darkness right now. And I don't even like to go on about it because there's so much light, there's so much hope, and so and I've been listening to conservation theory, and how do you sway people? It isn't with the scary story. And I would encourage you to tell two spot positive stories. Let people know that there are concerns, and that you know we do need to make changes, but give them much more hope than they have. Don't let them walk away feeling depressed, because there is hope. There really is. And so, yeah, I think we're reinventing ourselves. And a great example of that was that during COVID, it's like, how in the world is Jane going to travel to do all her lecture tours?
Mhm.
We rely on those. And she just reinvented herself. She started doing she's probably better known now than she was before COVID started, because she started doing all these amazing podcasts like what you're doing, and, speaking from behind her desk. And, were we bored to tears, spending way more time, me editing and making films in a different way, and I don't do any social media myself, but I provide a lot of, footage for social media and pictures and so forth. But um, Jane reinvented herself and came out of COVID even stronger than when she went in. And when you have 4 or 5 teams at the Jane Goodall Institute, the development team has evolved so many times. They're an incredible group of people. The science team, I'm on the communications team, and they're constantly pushing the limits of what we can do, finding ways that we can get to people more, sharing stories from Gombe in ways that have never been done before. And we have this, rich media, and now AI. I can search now with for thanks from Oxford University and the engineers there. I can type in real language. I want to see all the praying mantis I've ever taken a shot of at Gombe, and it will scan my entire archive in like a
Oh, that's nuts.
millisecond and just send me pages of insect shots, and most of them on the first page being mantises. With all of that, at our fingertips, it is an exciting time to be around, an exciting time to be a conservationist and a humanitarian.
Well, and that leads into my last question besides hire me, please, or let me come be
Yeah.
part of your family. With technology and with knowing that we need more people interested in conservation and doing more advocacy. What advice do you have for our listeners that either want to get involved or want to become a conservationist? Could you give them some hints on how that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I was more of a field person than an academic. I mean, I like academia. I love science. I read a lot of papers, and um, I enjoy reading about what other people are doing out there. But, I have all this data and never I'm never first offer on anything. I will I will I will support you in writing me up. But, and so I would encourage people like me. I'm, like, severely ADHD. You've noticed I haven't sat still the whole time I'm out here. I have a hard time, like, focusing. Writing papers is a very difficult thing. I'll get through the introduction and through some really exciting stuff, but then finishing is not my strong point. So for people like that, photography, filmmaking, doing the kinds of things that, and anyone can do that. I'm a rural kid from very remote areas of Oregon, and I just by picking up a camera and being interested and kind of teaching myself and like watching films that you admire and filmmakers who you admire, and practicing, and doing some editing yourself, edit your own material. And then, you don't have anybody to blame but yourself if you didn't get the key shot you need. You become a better filmmaker. My nephew is a great example of that he kind of grew up with an uncle who's out in the field doing filmmaking, and he fell in love with cameras and started, there's these, Will's bird video and Will's cat videos, these endless shots of him shooting wildlife and his own cats, and he became a filmmaker. And he's been out. That Kristen and Will and I have, side by side, made films together. And it's just so for if that's who you are, that's one avenue. Academia is another great way. If you are the kind of person who loves to read and study and explore, come up with something about chimps and chimp behavior, about something that they do that really just like you want to find out the answer, get into academia. And there
Mm.
are ways, even if you aren't independently wealthy, to support and fund yourself. Um, and then if it's just, how do I, what do I do to make the world a better place? I Get involved locally. And, I think anybody who's listening to this is also probably already on that path of making individual change. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And without putting too much pressure on yourself, yes, you know, buying locally is huge. Finding out who the local farmers are is absolutely crucial. Minimizing your use of plastic, huge. Like all of these things, but you don't have to do it all at once. Do it in baby steps if you have to. And then get involved in an organization that's doing these things, cleaning streams. And there's just so much that you can do. And you can reach out to us as well at the Jane Goodall Institute. If you send something, I have a specific question for Bill, it will get to me and I will answer it. Yeah,
Awesome.
I guess on that note, just like keep up the great work, Chris and Angie. And anybody who listened or who's listening, just like keep doing what you're doing, and we'll get there in the end. And another thing, don't worry about Mother Earth. She's going to be fine. It's our
Yeah.
existence on it
Yeah.
and our
It's us.
impact of it.
Yeah.
But don't spend your time, over my head 14,000 years ago with 2 miles of ice. Mother Nature knows what she's doing, and she's going to be fine. But it's what we're leaving to the seventh generation that we can concern ourselves about and do something about.
That's a beautiful point. Bill, I just, if you need to go birding in New Zealand, please come. I will. If there's anything you haven't seen, I'll check it off your list. And then I want to come see a nightjar with you. That is on my list of
Awesome.
birding. But
Well, I hope we can make that happen.
yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not kidding. Like, come to New Zealand. We will drive all over. I'll find kiwi, whatever you need. Let's go. I really appreciate
Excellent.
it. And one thing I want to say from the bottom of my heart and from Angie is thanking my guests and saying, I know you work so hard and you don't see the fruits of your labor, but they make a huge difference to the world
Thanks.
and to the next generation, even, to people older, the boomer generation that are listening to this podcast. You make a difference. Just thank you. Please keep doing what you're doing. And, just listening to you for the past hour, I'm just so excited. So thank you.
Well,
Yes.
thank you too.
Yeah, I
All
had a
right.
lot of good laughs, almost a few tears.
Yeah.
My gosh, I had to hold it in before I'd be like a bumbling wreck. But it's just been such an honor. I mean that from the bottom of my heart to talk with you, to be inspired by your work and your passion, and to hear stories about you and Jane Goodall, and of course we barely got a chance to touch on all your work. So I
Uh,
encourage everyone to check out Bill's films that he's done. They're on Disney, Nat Geo, Animal Planet. They're all over. And of course, please do yourselves a favor and go to the Jane Goodall Institute. That's Jane, Jane, Goodall, GOODALL.org. And all their info, it's a beautiful website. All their information is up there. A quote from the page is just a reminder that everything is connected and everyone can make a difference. Bill, you've made a huge difference, and we appreciate and love you for it. So thank you for sharing
Thank you.
just your energy and your spirit with us
Thanks a lot.
today. It's been
Thanks
a real
so much.
it's been a real honor. So
Me
thank you to our
too.
listeners, and check this podcast out on any platform. Please share. That's one easy thing that you can do right from your couch. And we will see everyone next time. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Chris.
Thank
Bye bye.
you.
Take care.
Bye bye.